The clippers stopped. Vivian Dawson unsnapped the cape and brushed the loose hair from the old man's collar. He reached for his wallet, hands trembling. She placed her palm over his and shook her head. "This one's on me, sir." His eyes filled. He nodded once, slow, heavy, and walked out without a word. 30 seconds later, her boss called her into the back office. The door closed. Through the glass, Denise Whitmore's hands sliced the air like blades. She walked out carrying her bag and her clippers.
You're fired!
Over a free haircut. But that old man? He wasn't just anybody. And what happened next, nobody saw coming. Let's rewind. 48 hours before that haircut changed everything. 5:45 a.m. Church Hill, Richmond, Virginia. The alarm didn't go off. It didn't need to. Vivian Dawson was already awake, standing in the narrow kitchen of a one-bedroom apartment she shared with her grandmother. The iron hissed against her salon smock, pressing each crease flat with the kind of care most people reserve for Sunday church clothes. On the refrigerator behind her, a chore chart written in purple marker, a photograph of her late grandfather in army dress uniform, and an overdue electric bill held up by a magnet shaped like a cross. Tanya Dawson shuffled in wearing slippers and a housecoat, already mid-sentence before her feet hit the linoleum. "You ironing that thing like it's a wedding dress. They don't pay you enough for all that pressing." Vivian smiled without looking up. "Grandma, presentation is half the job. The other half is tips." Tanya opened the fridge, stared into it like it owed her something, and closed it again. "And last month's tips didn't cover the light bill." She wasn't wrong. Vivian knew exactly how much was in the checking account, $211. Rent was $885, due in 9 days. The math didn't work. It hadn't worked in 3 months. But she pressed the smock anyway, hung it on the door hook, poured Tanya a cup of coffee, 1 sugar, no cream, and grabbed her bag. "I'll figure it out, Grandma." "You always say that." "Because I always do." Tanya watched her granddaughter walk out the front door into the gray morning light and said nothing. But her hand rested on the photograph on the fridge, the one of Vivian's grandfather, Staff Sergeant Theodore Dawson, who spent 22 years cutting hair for every soldier in his unit and never charged a dime for it. The bus came late. It always came late. Vivian stood at the stop with her earbuds in, watching the neighborhood scroll past through fogged glass. Boarded-up storefronts, a corner store with iron bars on the windows, a mural of a black girl with butterfly wings that someone had painted over the summer and no one had bothered to tag. Church Hill was changing. New coffee shops on one block, plywood on the next. Gentrification moved like water, slow, steady, and selective about what it touched. Prestige Salon and Spa sat right on that edge. Glass front, white lettering, lavender in the window boxes. From the outside, it looked like it belonged 3 neighborhoods over. Inside, it smelled like developer and eucalyptus and money. Vivian's station was the smallest one, tucked near the back next to the supply closet. She'd been there 2 years. In that time, she'd built a clientele that specifically requested her. Women who drove from across town, men who trusted no one else with a fade. Her hands were precise, patient. She could look at someone's head and see what it needed before they said a word. But skill didn't buy you a bigger station. Seniority did. And Denise Whitmore, the salon owner, measured loyalty in silence, not talent. Vivian opened her station drawer and touched the notebook she kept underneath the combs and clips. Soft black cover, pages dense with sketches, floor plans, chair layouts, a hand-drawn logo. Dawson's. Her barber shop. The one she'd open someday, a place where anyone could sit down regardless of what was in their wallet. She'd been building this dream on paper since cosmetology school, where she'd graduated with honors and $18,000 in debt that followed her like a second shadow. She closed the drawer when she heard Denise's heels clicking across the floor. "Vivian, a word." Denise pulled her aside near the reception desk. Fresh flowers had appeared on the counter overnight. New signage in the window. Something was happening. "I need you to focus on booked clients only this week. No walk-ins, no freebies, no exceptions. Denise's voice was low but sharp. We have a big opportunity coming. A corporate event planner wants to book the salon for a political fundraiser. Important people. Do you understand? Vivian nodded. Her jaw tightened, but she said nothing. After Denise clicked away, a coworker leaned over from the next station. She just doesn't want the wrong people in here when the money shows up. Vivian didn't respond, but her eyes drifted to the empty chair by the window, then to the front door, where anyone could walk in. Anyone at all. She didn't know it yet, but someone was about to. The next afternoon, the front door of Prestige Salon swung open, and the wrong person walked in. Harold Caldwell stood in the entrance like a man who'd already decided he didn't belong. 78 years old, clean but worn jacket, a military veteran pin on the left lapel, trousers pressed thin at the knees. His hair was long, uncombed, curling past his ears in uneven silver waves. His hands, large, weathered, trembled at his sides. The receptionist looked up, looked him over, looked back down. Harold stepped to the counter. "Excuse me, ma'am. Could you point me toward the VA clinic? I think I took the wrong bus." The receptionist waved vaguely toward the street. 2 blocks south, I think. Maybe 3. She didn't look up again. Harold nodded, turned to leave. From the back station, Vivian watched. She saw the tremor in his hands, the pin on his jacket, the way he held himself, straight-backed, dignified, even as the world told him he was invisible. She crossed the salon floor. "Sir?" Harold stopped. "When's the last time you had a haircut?" He blinked. "Oh, I wasn't looking for... I've got an open chair." Vivian gestured toward her station. "Sit down." He hesitated. She didn't. "Please." Harold Caldwell sat down in the last chair at Prestige Salon and Spa, and for the next 20 minutes, something shifted. Vivian draped the cape around his shoulders, ran warm water through his hair. Her fingers moved the way her grandfather had taught her, slow at first, reading the scalp, finding the natural line before the clippers touched skin. Harold closed his eyes. "How long has it been?" she asked quietly. "Since a haircut? Over a year. That's a long time." "Didn't seem to matter much." He paused. "My wife used to remind me, every 3 weeks like clockwork. 'Harold, you're starting to look like a stray dog.'" A small, broken laugh. "She passed 2 years ago. Elaine. After that, I guess I stopped caring about a lot of things." Vivian's hands didn't stop moving. Clippers hummed. Hair fell. "I'm sorry about your wife, sir." "She was something." His voice thinned. "Kept everything together. The house, me. After she was gone, I just sat there, in the same chair, watching the same window." Vivian worked in silence for a moment, shaping the fade above his ears. Clean, precise, the kind of cut that gives a man back 10 years. "My grandfather was military," she said. "Barber for his whole unit, 22 years. He always told me the best conversations happen in a barber's chair." Harold opened his eyes and looked at her reflection in the mirror. "Smart man." "The smartest I ever knew," she finished, removed the cape, brushed the cuttings from his collar. When she stepped back, the man in the mirror was different, sharper, cleaner, present. Harold stared at himself like he was meeting someone he'd forgotten. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his wallet. Inside, a few crumpled bills. Maybe $8, maybe less. It was everything he had, and they both knew it. Vivian placed her hand over his. "This one's on me, sir. Thank you for your service." Harold's chin trembled. He didn't speak. He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a creased photograph. A woman with kind eyes and silver hair, laughing at something outside the frame. "Elaine," he said. "She would have liked you." He put the photograph back, stood, nodded once, and walked out the front door into the afternoon light. The clippers were still warm in Vivian's hand when Denise appeared behind her. "My office, now!" The door closed. Denise didn't sit. "What did I tell you? No walk-ins, no freebies. That man wasn't even a client." "He's a veteran, Denise. He needed a haircut." And I need a business that doesn't look like a charity. You're done, Vivian. Pack your things. No warning, no discussion. Done. Vivian packed her station in silence. Clippers, combs, cape, the notebook with the hand-drawn logo and the floor plans and 3 years of a dream folded between the pages. She walked out with her head high and her eyes dry. The other stylists watched. Not one of them said a word. Vivian's key turned the lock at 4:47 p.m. She hadn't been home this early on a weekday in 2 years. Tanya was sitting at the kitchen table with a crossword puzzle and a cup of tea that had gone cold an hour ago. She looked up. Read her granddaughter's face the way she read weather. Fast, accurate, no second guess needed. What happened? It wasn't a question. Vivian set her bag on the counter. The clippers clinked against the notebook inside. She told it straight. The old man, the haircut, the free cut, Denise's office, the walkout. No embellishment, no tears. Just facts, laid end to end like dominoes. Tanya didn't interrupt. When Vivian finished, the old woman set her pen down slowly. You did what your grandfather would have done. Don't you dare feel ashamed. I'm not ashamed, Grandma. I'm broke. The math was simple and merciless. No income, $211 in the account. Rent in 9 days. 3 months already overdue. Without a paycheck, they had maybe 3 weeks before the landlord stopped being patient. That night, Vivian sat at the kitchen table with her phone and a list of every salon within bus distance. She called 12. The first 8 weren't hiring. The 9th said they'd call back. They didn't. The 10th hung up after she mentioned Prestige Salon. The 11th answered. The owner paused when Vivian gave her work history. Prestige? Denise Whitmore's place? Yes, ma'am, I was there for 2 years. Honey, Denise already called around. Told everyone you were unreliable, said you had a pattern of giving away services without authorization. A beat. I'm sorry, I can't take that risk. The line went dead. Vivian stared at the phone in her hand. Not just fired, blacklisted. Tanya's voice drifted from the living room, casual, almost too casual. Baby, did that man say his name? Vivian looked up. Harold. He said his name was Harold. Tanya was quiet for a moment, then, that's a good name, old-fashioned, the kind of name that belongs to somebody. She didn't say anything else, but something in her voice made Vivian pause. A weight, a knowing quality, as if the name meant more than 4 letters and 2 syllables. It didn't. Tanya had never heard of Harold Caldwell in her life, but the audience doesn't know that yet. Now, the other side of town. Richmond City Hall, same evening. Different world. Mayor Graham Caldwell sat behind a polished oak desk wide enough to land a small plane on. Behind him, framed commendations, a wall of handshake photographs, senators, governors, a former vice president, and a window overlooking the city he ran. On his desk, a proposal for a new community development initiative. The title, printed in bold across the cover page, Small Business Uplift. Investing in underserved neighborhoods. His assistant knocked. Your sister called again. She says your dad isn't doing well. Graham's jaw tightened. His pen stopped moving. I'll call her back. He didn't. Later that night, alone in his office, Graham's phone buzzed. Brenda. He let it ring 4 times before answering. Graham, I'm serious. Dad's not eating. He barely leaves the apartment. He's been like this since Mom died, and you know it. I know, Brenda. You'll what? Call him? When? You haven't visited in 6 years. Not since the funeral. The one you showed up to 90 minutes late because you had a campaign event. Silence. He's your father, Graham. I said I'll handle it. He hung up, sat in the dark office. The proposal on his desk glowed under the desk lamp. Small business uplift. And the irony would have been poetic if anyone had been watching. But no one was. Not yet. 1 week later, Vivian did the only thing she knew how to do. She set up a folding chair on the sidewalk. It wasn't much. A metal chair from the kitchen, a plastic cape she'd bought at the dollar store, her clippers plugged into an extension cord that snaked through the apartment window and into the living room outlet. A hand-lettered cardboard sign leaned against the stoop. "Haircuts. Pay what you can." Churchill noticed. The first customer was Mr. Irvin from 4B, 71, retired postal worker, hadn't had a proper trim in months because his hands shook too much to do it himself. He sat down, suspicious. "How much?" "Whatever you got, Mr. Irvin." He handed her a 5 and a sleeve of butter cookies his daughter had baked. Vivian gave him the cleanest cut he'd had in a year. He stood up, touched the back of his neck, and said, "Girl, you better not be out here tomorrow. I'm sending everybody I know." He did. By day 3, there was a line. Neighbors from the building. Elderly men from the Baptist church 2 blocks over. A teenager named Devin who needed a shape-up before his first job interview at the grocery store. A single mother who brought her twin boys and paid with a bag of rice and a jar of homemade jam. Tanya set up a card table next to the chair and started bringing out lemonade in a plastic pitcher. A neighbor named Curtis dragged over a portable radio tuned to the oldies station. By the end of the first week, the sidewalk in front of Vivian's building looked less like a makeshift barbershop and more like a block party that happened to include haircuts. Vivian wasn't making real money. $5 here, $8 there, sometimes nothing at all. But she was building something she couldn't name yet. Something that felt like the sketches in her notebook come to life in rough draft form. Community. Trust. A chair where anyone could sit. On the 8th day, Harold came back. He'd been looking for her. Asked around at the salon. They wouldn't tell him anything. Asked at the VA clinic. Finally, a woman at the bus stop recognized Vivian's description and pointed him toward Churchill. He walked up to the sidewalk chair, hat in hand, looking like a man carrying a debt he didn't know how to repay. "I heard what happened," he said quietly. "I didn't mean to cause you trouble, young lady." Vivian was mid-cut on a 12-year-old boy who wouldn't stop fidgeting. She didn't look up. "You didn't cause anything, Mr. Harold. My boss made her choice. I made mine." She paused, met his eyes. "I'd make the same one again." Harold stood there for a moment. Then he sat down on the stoop and waited. When the boy was done, Vivian patted the chair. "You're next." "I can't let you—" "Sit down, Mr. Harold." He sat. She draped the cape. The clippers hummed. And for the second time, the world around them went quiet. Tanya watched from the window upstairs and said nothing. But she smiled. 3 days later, a dark green sedan pulled to the curb on Church Hill, and a man got out holding a microphone and a press badge. Russell Boyd, 34, local TV reporter for WRIC Channel 6. He'd been driving through the neighborhood to cover a water main break 2 streets over when he saw the line of people on the sidewalk and the woman with clippers in her hand. He watched for 10 minutes before approaching. "Excuse me, I'm Russell Boyd, Channel 6. Mind if I ask what's going on here?" Vivian looked at the microphone like it was a snake. "Just cutting hair." "On the sidewalk?" "On the sidewalk." Russell smiled. "There's a story here. Would you let me do a short segment? Human interest. 2 minutes, tops." Vivian shook her head. "I'm not looking for attention." From behind her, Tanya's voice rang out like a church bell. "Tell your story, baby. The truth has legs." Vivian looked at her grandmother, looked at Russell, looked at the line of people waiting in folding chairs and on stoops, people who'd shown up for her when no one else would. "Fine. 2 minutes." Russell set up the camera. Vivian stood in front of her sidewalk chair, hands steady, voice clear. She didn't trash Denise, didn't play the victim. She spoke the way she cut hair. Precise, honest, no wasted motion. "I was raised to believe that when someone's hurting and you can help, you help. I helped a veteran who needed a haircut. I'd do it again tomorrow, but I lost my job for it. And now no salon in this city will hire me. So I'm out here." Russell turned the camera to Harold, who was sitting on the stoop with a cup of Tanya's lemonade. "This young woman treated me like a human being," Harold said. His voice was steady but thin. "That's all she did. Nobody else in that salon even looked at me." The segment aired on the 6 o'clock news that evening. By 9 o'clock, it had been shared 400 times on local Facebook groups. By midnight, it was on Twitter. By morning, 11,000 people had seen Vivian Dawson's face and heard her say the words, "I'd do it again tomorrow." The next day, across town, Graham Caldwell was being prepped for a budget meeting when his assistant walked in holding a tablet. "Sir, you should see this." Graham took the tablet absently. A news clip, some local story, a woman cutting hair on a sidewalk. He half-watched, already thinking about the meeting, until the camera panned to an old man sitting on a stoop. Graham's hand stopped. The old man was holding a cup of lemonade, wearing a clean but worn jacket, a military pin on the lapel, pale blue eyes that Graham had known his entire life. "That's my father." The assistant looked up. "Sir?" "That man," Graham's voice dropped. "On the news, that's my father." He watched the full segment, twice. His face moved through something. Shock first, then guilt, then a quiet, private anger that had nowhere to go but inward. He picked up his phone, put it down, picked it up again. He called Brenda. "Why didn't you tell me he was—" "I've been telling you, Graham." Her voice was flat, exhausted. "You haven't been listening." The line went quiet. Graham stared at the frozen frame on the tablet, his father's face, on a sidewalk in Church Hill, being cared for by a stranger. The most powerful man in Richmond had never felt smaller. For a few days, the world was kind. The news segment brought a small wave of new faces to the sidewalk chair. People Vivian had never met drove across town with cash in hand and stories on their lips. A retired teacher from the West End left $20 for a $5 trim. A church group dropped off a box of supplies, capes, combs, disinfectant, a handwritten card that read, "Keep going, sister." Someone started a collection jar at the corner store without asking. It wasn't life-changing money, but it was enough to cover the electric bill and buy another month before the landlord ran out of patience. That evening, Vivian and Tanya sat across from each other at the kitchen table. Fried chicken, collard greens, cornbread, the first real dinner they'd cooked in weeks instead of scraping together whatever was cheapest. The apartment smelled like butter and garlic and something close to normal. Tanya set down her fork and looked at her granddaughter. "Your grandfather used to say, 'The chair doesn't care who sits in it. Rich, poor, black, white. Everybody needs somebody to make them feel human.'" Vivian smiled. He said that a lot. Because it was true a lot. The next morning, Harold showed up at the apartment door. Not for a haircut this time. He was holding a small potted plant, green leaves, terracotta pot, a little crooked from the bus ride over. Elaine always said a new beginning deserves something green. He held it out like an offering. "I don't know if this counts as a new beginning, but it felt like one." Vivian took the plant, held it with both hands. "It counts, Mr. Harold." She placed it on the kitchen windowsill where the morning light came through strongest. That same night, 12 miles away, Graham Caldwell sat alone in his home office. The house was dark. His wife was asleep. The news segment played on his laptop for the 4th time. His father's face filled the screen. Pale blue eyes, clean haircut, the ghost of a smile Graham hadn't seen in years. He opened his phone, scrolled to the contact labeled Dad. His thumb hovered over the green button. He closed the phone. Not tonight. It took Carl Hutchins exactly 48 hours to smell blood. Hutchins was a city council member from Richmond's 3rd District, a man who'd spent the last 2 years looking for a crack in Graham Caldwell's armor and finding nothing. Graham was careful, polished, popular. The kind of mayor who said the right things, shook the right hands, and never left a loose thread hanging. Until now. Hutchins watched the Channel 6 segment 3 times, leaning forward in his chair a little more with each replay. A young black woman, fired for helping an old man. A veteran, living alone, struggling. And the kicker, the old man's last name, Caldwell, same as the mayor. A phone call to a contact at the VA confirmed what Hutchins already suspected. He called a press conference for the next morning. "The mayor of this city," Hutchins said, standing behind a cluster of microphones on the steps of City Hall, "has built his entire platform on community uplift, on caring for the vulnerable, on family values." He let the words settle. But his own father, a military veteran, is living in a one-bedroom apartment, alone, in poverty. And a 26-year-old black woman lost her job for doing what the mayor's own family wouldn't, showing Harold Caldwell basic human decency. He paused, looked directly into the cameras. Where was the mayor? Where was the son? The story detonated. By noon, 3 national outlets had picked it up. By evening, Vivian Dawson's name was trending. Social media split into camps. Those who called Vivian a hero and those, stoked by the political framing, who called the whole thing a stunt. Comment sections turned into battlefields. Opinion pieces launched before anyone had all the facts. Vivian, who had wanted nothing more than to cut hair on a sidewalk and pay her rent, was suddenly at the center of a firestorm she hadn't asked for and couldn't control. The ugliness came fast. Online trolls flooded her social media, accounts she barely used, with racist slurs, accusations, threats. Someone wrote that she'd staged the whole thing for a GoFundMe scam. Someone else posted her home address. On Tuesday morning, Vivian walked outside to set up the sidewalk chair and found a spray-painted word on the brick wall next to her building door. A single word. The worst one. Red paint still wet. She stood there for 10 seconds. Then she got a rag and a bucket of soapy water, and she scrubbed it off before Tanya could see it. That same afternoon, Denise Whitmore appeared on a local podcast called Richmond Real Talk. The host lobbed her soft questions, and Denise swung hard. Vivian was fired for repeated policy violations, Denise said, her voice smooth and rehearsed. She had a pattern of insubordination. The free haircut was the last straw, not the only one. I run a business, not a charity. Vivian watched the clip on her phone that night, sitting on the edge of her bed. Her hands shook. Not from anger, from something deeper. The feeling of being erased, rewritten, turned into a character in someone else's story. Tanya walked in, saw the screen, and turned it off. Don't let them rewrite your story, baby. They don't have the pen. The next morning, Harold appeared at Vivian's door. He wasn't wearing his jacket. His eyes were red. He looked like a man who hadn't slept. I'm so sorry, he said. This is all my fault. If I hadn't walked into that salon... Mr. Harold, please. Vivian stepped aside to let him in. You needed a haircut, that's all. None of this is your fault. Harold sat down at the kitchen table. Tanya brought him coffee without being asked. He wrapped both hands around the mug and stared at it for a long time. Then, quietly, my son is the mayor. The apartment went still. Vivian blinked. What? Graham Caldwell. He's my son. Harold's voice was barely above a whisper. We haven't spoken in 6 years, not since his mother's funeral. I'm telling you because you deserve to know the truth, and because I think it's time I stopped hiding from it. Vivian sat down across from him. She didn't speak for a long moment. Then, why are you telling me this, Mr. Harold? Because they're using you to get to him, and you didn't sign up for that. Neither did I. 2 days later, the trap arrived. A woman Vivian had never met showed up at the sidewalk barbershop, well-dressed, professional, carrying a business card that read, Community Advocacy Partners. She said she represented a group that wanted to help Vivian, fund a wrongful termination lawsuit against Prestige Salon, get her on national television, set up a legal defense fund, all of it, pro bono. We believe in your story, Vivian. We want to make this right. It sounded like salvation. It smelled like politics. Vivian took the card. That night, she showed it to Tanya. Tanya turned the card over in her fingers. Who benefits from you being angry, baby? You or them? Vivian thought about Harold sitting at her kitchen table, telling her the truth with shaking hands. She thought about Graham Caldwell, a man she'd never met, whose father had been kinder to her than her own employer. She thought about the word on the wall and the podcast and the comments and the cameras and all the people who wanted to use her pain as a weapon. She called the number on the card the next morning. Thank you for the offer, but I'm not interested. Vivian, you don't understand what we can do for... I understand fine. I'm not going to be anybody's weapon, not against an old man's son." She hung up. Tanya, listening from the kitchen doorway, nodded once. Your grandfather would have said the same thing. Harold Caldwell had not asked his daughter for anything in 6 years. Not money, not company, not even a phone call on his birthday. He was a proud man, and pride had a way of building walls that looked like strength from the outside and felt like prison from within. But on a Thursday morning, he took the bus to Brenda Caldwell Moore's house in the West End, knocked on her door, and asked for help. Not for himself. "She lost her job because of me," Harold said, sitting at Brenda's dining room table with a cup of tea he hadn't touched. "She's being dragged through the mud. People saying things about her online, her old boss lying about her on the radio. And you know what she did when they offered her money to go after Graham?" He shook his head. "She said no, turned it down flat, said she wouldn't be used as a weapon against an old man's son." Brenda sat across from him, watching her father's face. She hadn't seen him this animated in years, since before Mom died, since before the silence swallowed everything. "She's a good person, Brenda, better than all of us." "Dad, I'm not asking you to fix my life. I've made my peace with how things are between me and Graham. But this girl doesn't deserve what's happening to her. And your brother is the only person in this city with the power to do something about it." Brenda drove to City Hall that afternoon. She didn't call ahead, didn't schedule a meeting. She walked past Graham's assistant with the kind of authority that only a sister who changed your diapers could carry, and closed the office door behind her. Graham looked up from his desk. "Brenda, I'm in the middle of—" "Dad came to see me." Graham stopped. "Not about you, not about the news, not about any of this political circus." She sat down across from him, uninvited. "He came to ask me to help the woman who cut his hair, the one who got fired, the one who's being torn apart right now because she did something decent." Graham leaned back. His face was a mask, but the crack was showing, in the tightness around his eyes, in the way his hands gripped the armrest. "This isn't about politics anymore, Graham. Dad came to me because he couldn't come to you. He's not asking you to fix his life. He's asking you to help someone else. A stranger showed him more kindness than his own son has in 6 years. She let that land. "Sit with that." Graham said nothing. Brenda stood. She was halfway to the door when she turned back. "He's not angry at you, Graham. He's proud of you. He told that reporter on camera. The whole city heard it." Her voice softened. "But pride doesn't keep you warm when you're alone." The door clicked shut behind her. Graham sat in the silence for a long time. Across town, Russell Boyd was working late. The original story had been a 2-minute human interest segment, but the political explosion had turned it into something bigger, and Russell could feel the real story underneath the noise. Not the politics, not the mayor's family drama, but something rotten at the core of Prestige Salon and Spa. He started making calls. Former employees, ex-clients, anyone who'd worked at that salon in the last 5 years. The picture came together fast. 3 former stylists confirmed independently that Denise Whitmore routinely turned away walk-in clients based on appearance. One of them, a woman named Carla who'd quit 8 months earlier, provided screenshots of a group text from Denise sent the week before the political fundraiser booking. "We can't have people like that in here when the council people come. Keep it clean. You know what I mean." People like that. Russell read the message 3 times. Then he pulled the city's public records on small business grants issued under Graham Caldwell's Community Uplift program. It took 20 minutes to find what he was looking for. Prestige Salon and Spa had received a $15,000 grant 18 months ago. The application, signed by Denise Whitmore, contained a section titled Community Commitment Statement, in which she pledged to provide accessible, inclusive services to all Richmond residents regardless of income or background. A salon that took public money to serve the community had fired someone for doing exactly that. Russell saved the file, picked up his phone. He had one more call to make. 3 weeks after Vivian Dawson was fired for giving away a $22 haircut, Mayor Graham Caldwell called a press conference. The City Hall press room was standing room only. Every local outlet, 2 national networks, bloggers, podcasters, citizen journalists with phone cameras held high. In the back row, Carl Hutchins sat with his arms crossed and a thin smile on his face, already composing the press release he'd send the moment Graham stumbled. Russell Boyd stood near the front, notebook open, pen still. Graham walked to the podium. No notes, no teleprompter, no flag pin, no rehearsed smile, no aide whispering in his ear. He gripped the edges of the lectern and looked out at the room, and for the first time since this story began, the mayor of Richmond didn't look like a politician. He looked like a man who hadn't slept. "I'm not here to talk about policy today." The room shifted. Pens stopped. "I'm here to talk about something I should have talked about a long time ago." He took a breath. "Harold Caldwell is my father." The murmur rolled through the room like a wave. Hutchins uncrossed his arms. Russell didn't move. "He's 78 years old. He's a veteran. He served this country. And when he came home, he built a life, raised 2 children, loved a woman named Elaine for 46 years, and never once asked anyone for anything." Graham paused. "And I failed him." The room went dead silent. "I didn't fail him because I'm the mayor. I failed him because I'm his son, and I stopped showing up. I let ambition build a wall between me and the man who raised me. I missed dinners, birthdays, holidays. I showed up 90 minutes late to my own mother's funeral because I had a campaign event I thought couldn't wait." His voice cracked. He caught it. It could have waited. Everything could have waited. He looked down at his hands on the lectern, then back up. 3 weeks ago, a young woman named Vivian Dawson did something I should have been doing. She saw my father, not as a political talking point, not as an inconvenience, not as somebody to look past, but as a person, a human being who needed to be seen. She gave him a haircut. She gave him 20 minutes of her time and the kind of dignity that shouldn't be remarkable but somehow is. Graham's jaw tightened. And she was punished for it. She was fired. She was blacklisted from every salon in this city. She was attacked online, called things I won't repeat in this room. Her former employer went on a podcast and lied about her record. And through all of it, Vivian Dawson didn't lash out. She didn't file a lawsuit. She didn't sell her story. She set up a chair on a sidewalk and kept cutting hair. He let that sit. She was offered money to publicly condemn me. She turned it down. A 26-year-old woman with $18,000 in student debt and 3 months of back rent turned down the easiest payday of her life because she refused to be used as a weapon against a man she'd never met, because that man was the father of the old man she'd helped. The room was so quiet that the hum of the air conditioning sounded loud. I don't deserve that kind of grace, but Vivian Dawson gave it anyway. Not to me, to my father. Graham straightened. When he spoke again, his voice was no longer breaking. It was clear. Today, I'm announcing 3 actions. First, a formal review of all small business grants issued under the city's Community Uplift program to ensure that every recipient is upholding the community service standards they pledged to meet. That review will begin with Prestige Salon and Spa, which received a $15,000 grant 18 months ago while maintaining practices that are the opposite of inclusive. Hutchins' smile disappeared. Second, a new micro-grant initiative for independent cosmetologists and barbers in underserved neighborhoods, funded through the existing Uplift program. If we're going to talk about community investment, we need to put money in the hands of people who are actually doing the work. Russell was writing fast. Third, and this is not from the mayor's office, this is from me personally, I owe Vivian Dawson an apology. Not because my office failed her, although it did, because I failed her, because I wasn't there for the man she helped when I should have been. He paused, looked directly into the center camera, and said 10 words that would be replayed, shared, printed, and quoted for months to come. Kindness shouldn't cost your livelihood. Not in my city. 2 seconds of silence, then applause. Not polite applause, not political applause, but the kind that comes from the chest. That evening, Graham drove across town to a one-bedroom apartment he hadn't visited in 6 years. The building was smaller than he remembered. The hallway smelled like old carpet and someone's dinner. He stood in front of apartment 3C and knocked. Harold opened the door. He was wearing a clean shirt. His hair was neat. Vivian's cut, still holding its shape after 3 weeks. Father and son looked at each other for a long moment. 6 years of silence standing between them like furniture in a dark room. "You look tired, son." "I am, Dad." Harold stepped aside. Graham walked in. The apartment was small, tidy, and quiet. A single lamp on, a bowl of soup on the stove. On the kitchen counter, in a simple frame, the photograph of Elaine. Kind eyes, silver hair, laughing at something just out of view. Graham picked it up. Held it carefully, the way you hold something you've been afraid to touch. "I'm sorry I wasn't there. For the funeral. For everything after." Harold sat down at the table. "You're here now." They didn't solve everything that night. That's not how it works. Not in real life, not in this story. 6 years of silence don't dissolve over one bowl of soup. But Graham stayed. He sat across from his father at the small kitchen table, and they ate reheated soup and bread, and they talked about small things. The weather, the neighborhood, a bird that had been building a nest on Harold's windowsill. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. The next week, Russell Boyd's full investigative piece aired on Channel 6. Former employees, text messages, grant records. The phrase, "people like that," played on screen 3 times. Prestige Salon and Spa faced a formal city audit. The $15,000 grant was suspended pending review. The corporate fundraiser pulled out. Clients canceled. Appointments emptied. Denise Whitmore didn't lose her salon, but she lost something harder to replace: her reputation, her credibility, and the comfortable fiction that what she'd done was just business. She sat alone in her empty salon on a Tuesday afternoon, staring at the chair by the back wall. Vivian's old station, the smallest one, the one that used to be the busiest seat in the shop. It was empty now, and it stayed that way. 1 month later, Vivian Dawson stood on a sidewalk again, but this time the chair was inside. The storefront on Broad Street wasn't much: 800 square feet, a cracked tile floor she'd mopped 3 times, and windows wide enough to catch the morning sun from both directions. The previous tenant had been a tax preparer. Before that, a shoe repair shop. Before that, nobody remembered. But today, it was hers. The sign went up at 9 o'clock that morning. 2 men from the neighborhood lifted it into the brackets above the door while Tanya supervised from the sidewalk, pointing and correcting as if she'd hung signs her whole life. "Dawson's, a chair for everyone." Inside, 2 barber chairs sat side by side. The first was brand new, chrome and black leather, bought with the city's micro-grant and a small community fundraiser that Russell's viewers had organized in 4 days. The second was older, worn leather, heavy iron base, a small scratch on the right armrest where a generation of hands had rested. It had belonged to Staff Sergeant Theodore Dawson, and a neighbor named Curtis had spent 2 weeks restoring it in his garage without being asked. On the wall behind the chairs, a framed photograph of Vivian's grandfather in army dress uniform. Beside it, a small hand-lettered sign: "Veterans always cut free." On the windowsill, a potted plant with green leaves in a terracotta pot, a little crooked from a bus ride. Harold was the first customer. He walked in at 9:15, wearing a clean jacket, his military pin on the lapel. He sat down in the antique chair, his chair now, though no one had said so out loud, and Vivian draped the cape around his shoulders. "The usual, Mr. Harold?" He looked at her in the mirror and smiled. A real smile, the kind his face had forgotten how to make for 2 years. "The usual." The clippers hummed, hair fell, the radio played something soft. The bell above the door rang. Graham Caldwell walked in, not in a suit, not with cameras, not as the mayor. Just a man in a Saturday jacket carrying a small potted plant. He set it on the counter. "My father tells me this is what you give for new beginnings." Vivian looked at the plant. looked at Harold, looked at Graham. She took it with both hands and placed it in the window next to the first one. It is. The shop filled slowly through the morning. Old neighbors from Church Hill, new faces from across town, a teenager getting a shape-up, an elderly woman who just wanted to sit and watch. Black, white, old, young, filling the chairs, filling the room, filling the space with the sound of clippers and conversation and laughter. Tanya sat by the door with a pitcher of lemonade and a look on her face that said everything she'd never say out loud. The chair didn't care who sat in it. It never had. 1 year later, Dawson's barbershop had 2 employees, a waiting list on Saturdays, and a jar of lemonade that Tanya refilled every morning, whether anyone asked or not. Harold came in every other Saturday. Same chair, same time. He'd become a fixture, reading the newspaper in the corner, greeting every customer by name, telling stories about Elaine to anyone who'd listen. Sometimes Graham came with him. Not every time, but enough. They were not fully healed. 6 years of silence doesn't vanish in 12 months. But they were talking. They were trying. And for now, that was enough. Vivian swept the floor at the end of a long Saturday. The shop was empty. The radio played low. She paused, leaning on the broom, and looked at the photograph of her grandfather on the wall. Staff Sergeant Theodore Dawson, the man who taught her that a barber's chair was the most honest place in the world. She smiled, turned off the lights, locked the door. Outside, the sign glowed in the streetlight. A chair for everyone. Vivian Dawson didn't set out to change anything. She just gave an old man a haircut. But that's the thing about kindness. You never know whose life you're about to touch, or whose heart you're about to unlock.